Hey guys.
Hello, hello. How's everybody doing? Good. All right. All right. Maybe we can get some comments in the chat here. We've got Chadwick. All right. So we're gonna we have had a very highly requested technical AMA. We love doing these. We want to do more of them. We would do them every day if we weren't just working night and day on a million things, which I think you can look at all of us and see we're pretty tired because we've been working around the clock, as we should be. Okay. So we've got some questions. All the questions we'll be answering today as part of the AMA are community driven. If we have time, we'll add more, but we've pulled all of these off of Twitter, Telegram, other areas, and we're here to give transparent information. So, all right, we're going to kick off. Before we do anything, I want to talk a little bit about just the high level of where we are. I think we're in this market macro condition and everybody's getting beat up right and left. And I just want to talk a little bit about Scale's goals broadly. So we wake up every morning as a core team, and I know the dApp developers and the validators and many of the community members, and we are passionate about building a phenomenal product that brings Web3 to the forefront. Right now, there's still thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands of real users that are actually using Web3 every day. We want to bring in hundreds of millions, okay? And so we feel the only way that's possible is to have scalable infrastructure. You can't just have one database. You can't just have one blockchain. And so when we get up every day, we think, how can we build the product? How can we, build the ecosystem? How can we get dApp developers on board? And that is our goal, and that's our mission, okay? Now, when we're in these market conditions like we're in, teams like ours that are mission driven and communities like ours that are mission driven, we thrive. Okay. Now, hey, there's turmoil, there's fear. You know what? We're going to hustle and we're going to grind. We're not worrying about prices of the market. We're worrying about traction, and our goal is to get on-chain metrics going. Okay. We're a year behind the monolithic layer ones that I would describe as older generation technology. Almost all of them now are creating plans and pre-marketing plans to have many databases, i.e. many blockchains. And that would be one step. And then the second step for them would be able to have these blockchains also be able to interact. So you don't have these breaking user experiences. So we're ahead of that tech. And there's big efforts being funded now that are multi-chain and modular that won't see the light of day in the real world for like a year and a half. And we're ready now. So, hey, it's for all of us, we know it's been a long haul, and we have been grinding, we've been building, and we've been building in public. Everything's been open and transparent, every line of code, every contribution to GitHub. But hey, we've come a long way. And I think despite the conditions, we need to be happy. Like, we need to be pumped. We're here. We're launching. We had a huge announcement today with Fireside that's going to transform the way media is funded, that the way digital content is created and financed, and who owns actual productions. And there's some amazing things happening there on that platform that we've just seen the tip of the iceberg. And we also announced last night the release of the community-driven project for an NFT chain called the Calypso NFT Hub. Calypso is a moon orbiting Saturn, and Europa is a moon orbiting Jupiter. By the way, Europa also has a unfreezable liquidity pool that lives under the surface of that moon, which is a pretty cool name. And by the way, those are all community generated names, themes, teams, and efforts. And they are taking scale chains and they're building products and infrastructure with their own governance and their own, really each one of those chains has the same throughput as one of the major layer one chains. Actually has way faster throughput than any major layer one chain you see out there today. Okay. All right. So anyways, we're hungry, we're pumped, we're grinding, we're working every day. We appreciate every single one of you that's out there listening, caring, retweeting, tweeting, creating content, creating awareness. And we're doing the hard work on the back end, getting product ready with in the open source community, and also out there on the BD front. And we have a lot of deals, and as you saw today, there's a lot of things we can't announce until our partners announce them and they, are released from this confidential state where we're frankly not allowed to say anything till they release after these embargoes and these confidential periods. So there's more good stuff coming, but let's talk about the tech. All right. So I'm just going to go down the list of questions. Also, this question spreadsheet is public, so anybody can see it. And there's actually a type form that will populate one of the spreadsheets, and then we've collated questions onto another spreadsheet. All right. The first, before I get into the first one, I want to give a high-level technical status update. All right. So, so the SKALE v2 has been upgraded. We did it. Woo. Now that doesn't mean instantly all the applications go live. There's phases. The one step is chains are created, but when chains are created, it doesn't mean that application contracts are deployed on the chain. So, for example, the Ruby exchange. Here's the update regarding Ruby. We had a call with them this morning. We've been talking to them every day, multiple times a day. They own the timeline as well as Boot and the other contributors to the Europa chain, but they will have their chain very soon. The Europa chain will be created. They'll be running testing and deploying contracts, configuring that chain, doing everything they do on their own. And they will be updating everybody on Monday as, okay, here's the date, we're ready to go live. And we're, hey, I could be very soon thereafter. It all depends on I can't speak for that team, but they're going to have everything they need because their chain will be issued to them very shortly. Anyways, we're really close. We're on the precipice. Block Brawlers is going live on the 18th. Hopefully Ruby is live, and I'm not going to say any dates, as well as Boot, as well as then other games coming on board and Web3 apps. And then the NFT hub clearly will be there. We'll have these two orbital moons that are providing liquidity on one and NFT marketplace on the other. All right. So let's roll into questions. Let's start. Stan, why don't you tackle this one? How does the SKALE IMA bridge help bring extra value to other projects? So one, I'll just kind of paraphrase this from AML. Can you talk a little bit about IMA and what value does that bring in terms of maybe cross-chain bridging, mainnet bridging? And then there's a follow-on question about some examples of the difference between the chains. And maybe Chadwick, I know you've run some data on SKALE IMA compared to other chains, but Stan, talk a little bit about IMA because it is probably one of the most talked about components to SKALE because of the BLS component, but go for it.
Yes, that's a great question. So I think in general, if you look at how token transfers happen in the blockchain world, it's one of the hardest problems to solve. How do you transfer tokens from one blockchain to another? And in reality, pretty much all of token bridges that run today are centralized. So if you have chain A and chain B, and you transfer a particular token from chain H to chain B, the best kept secret of the industry, or the worst kept secret of the industry, is that there is actually a person who holds the key. So you're trusting essentially a person or organization to transfer the tokens. So people usually don't like to talk about it, but the reality is that token bridges are pretty much all of the bridges that exist today are centralized. So especially the ones which run in the Ethereum ecosystem are centralized, meaning that when you transfer token from point A to point B, you actually trust to people that actually hold the key. And if these people ever become malicious, they could actually steal all of your money. So SKALE bridge is pretty much the only bridge in existence in the entire Ethereum ecosystem which is decentralized and open source. You could just pretty much search GitHub and you try to find a bridge which is decentralized, and you won't find, I think, any. right? So we're the only ones that actually bridge in a decentralized way, meaning that if you transfer tokens from Scale to Ethereum mainnet, or if you transfer tokens from one Scale chain to another Scale chain, the token transfers decentralized. There's no one that holds the key. It's actually the security is collectively shared by all nodes in a Scale chain. So to actually break token transfer, to compromise token transfer, you have to compromise majority of nodes in a Scale chain. So that's a big difference between Scale and every other project. And it did take longer time to develop, but currently we are pretty much the only ones that can claim this decentralized bridge. So another important thing about our decentralized bridge is that it's actually free to transfer tokens from one Scale chain to another. So it's not only decentralized and open source, so the source of the bridge is actually on GitHub. But also the transaction fees are zero. So if you would like to transfer tokens from point A to point B in Scale universe, in Scaleverse, the transfers are free. And typically what we expect to have in the future is that people will earn tokens on chain X, such as a game chain. You may play a game, and then at some point you may want to actually exchange these tokens for something else. So you'll be able to transfer those tokens to another chain and exchange them, or do some other decentralized finance application for these tokens. So that's why the uniqueness of the bridge is that it is decentralized and open source and free, and it depends on this mathematical cryptographic entity, which is called the BLS signature. And the signature is secure in a sense that to break the system, you need to break 2/3 of the nodes that compose a particular chain. That's why it's so important for us, this entire thing. And other projects that are also Ethereum compatible, I can name Avalanche, for instance, or Polygon. They don't have decentralized bridges, but they actually do state that they are developing them. So from this perspective, we are well ahead, because actually we do have a decentralized bridge now. It's open source. Everyone can take a look at the source. There's nothing that we are hiding. There's no guy that actually is hidden somewhere and actually does the token transfers. It's actually done by software, and the software is decentralized.
So Stan, I want to go a little deeper there. I think probably people are wondering, well, why does it matter if a bridge is decentralized? Can you speak a little bit, two things, one to just the decentralization properties, but also how that ties back to the consensus, and really, it just keeps secure. It doesn't, anyways, just you answer that. I've got some thoughts too, but you're great at kind of, bringing those points together.
Yeah, I think there's, there are three reasons why a decentralized bridge is better than centralized. But one thing to remember, that kind of in the short term, people may be okay using centralized bridges, but it's always that the security matters only when things get compromised. So if you're using a centralized bridge, this just means there's a party, usually organization, and this organization is controlled by some people. These people have a key, and this key is used to, say, transfer tokens from a blockchain X to blockchain Y. And so, there are several things that could happen if you have a centralized bridge. First of all, there could be something which is people kind of call, I think, rug pull. People who actually run the bridge can actually take the money and run away. And in many cases, this probability is not high, because, if someone takes money and runs away, there's definitely a criminal responsibility for this. So people like that do this are known, and the project founders or the people that actually people that control the project are usually known. So there's very little incentive for them to run away and take the money. But what can actually happen is that since in a centralized bridge, the money is actually, funds are actually controlled by a single key. The key can be just compromised. So it's not like project founders who want the money stolen. It's just that since the bridge depends on a single key, hackers can actually steal this key. And this could be much stronger risk than founders or people who lead the project becoming malicious. But centralization.
Hey, Stan, I was just also going to say, just to add to that really quickly. So when you think, so if you think about the entire effort of even doing consensus, it kind of loses all its value if just at the end of the day, when you're moving something, like 4 people can kind of say what happened, right? It almost makes consensus say,
totally. It like makes no sense.
Superfluous
Correct.
effort.
Totally. What's the point? What's the point actually running blockchain if let's say you transfer funds from Ethereum to Polygon, and Polygon bridge is centralized? What's the point running things on Polygon blockchain if the bridge is centralized? The money that actually is on Polygon blockchain is controlled by someone. We don't know who, but someone centralized, right? So it just, if you want to build a decentralized system, it has to be either all decentralized or all centralized. If part of the system is decentralized, but the critical thing, the bridge is centralized, and the money is actually stored on the bridge, the only thing you need to do to break the system is to hack the bridge. It doesn't matter at all that the blockchain is decentralized in that way. And then the last thing which I want to mention is that when things are centralized, then also there's a large risk of the thing being affected by a government entity or laws of a particular country. Because if blockchain is decentralized, if you have Bitcoin or Ethereum, no particular government, no particular country can affect how this blockchain is being run. But when you have a centralized component that means that you have people, and these people are legally, there's a jurisdiction over those people by a particular country, by a particular government. So there's much stronger possibility that, a government, there could be a subpoena or a government order or whatever, and this government order could say, okay, please transfer this money to the government or pay taxes, whatever. So centralized systems are in general much more vulnerable to government action. So these are 3 things, I think, And
Stan, I want one more thing, because they're like, can you describe how SKALE runs consensus, right? We have all this effort going into this beautiful consensus, but then the threshold encryption actually works with the consensus to then do the bridging. Because the difference would be, on another platform, let's say you have this nice decentralized consensus, but then 4 people say, great, this happened. On SKALE, it doesn't rely on Can you just describe a little the mechanics for people so they can understand how is that possible for that to happen? Because this is actually, it's a complicated thing, and it's one of these things that is a huge advantage for SKALE that I think we need to keep talking about more. And you could talk about the connection between consensus and bridging on SKALE.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jack. So if let's say you have 2 blockchains, so both of these blockchains are proof of stake. So on both of these blockchains, to create a block, you need to have a supermajority of nodes. So, let's say initially these 2 blockchains are running independently. So there are blocks happening and consensus happening on chain X and consensus happening on chain Y. And if it's a programmable blockchain, there will be some smart contracts running on both chains, and there will be blocks generated. So each of those chains, we can think about each of them as Ethereum compatible chains, right? You can think that on each of those chains, you have MetaMask, you have money, whatever. Just think about like 2 decentralized Ethereum chains. Now, if the bridge is centralized, then essentially in addition to this two decentralized chains, you add is a human or a computer. So literally, when you transfer tokens from chain X to chain Y, you literally actually transfer these tokens to this human, and say you on chain X, this human gets the token, and then on chain Y this human actually then that actually gives you tokens or prints tokens for you. So this human becomes literally the trusted party that actually holds all the funds. And the actual process of transfer just means that you actually literally don't really even transfer tokens to another chain. You transfer the tokens to this trusted party on the same chain where you are, and then this trusted party gives you this tokens from another chain. But then this trusted party becomes like a bank, and it could be human, could be a computer, but whatever. But the entire security of transfers just depends on the party. In case of a decentralized bridge, you just remove this. There's no this trusted party. There's no the human or the computer that actually holds all the funds. Instead, what happens is that the same nodes that run chain X or the chain Y, the same nodes talk to each other, and there's not a single trusted node. They talk to each other as groups. So if you transfer tokens from chain X to chain Y, this means that nodes that form chain X, they collectively agree that you actually transfer tokens to their custody, and they sign the statement, and they actually notify nodes on chain Y, and then nodes on chain Y again collectively agree that they got the custody of the tokens, and they print the tokens. So essentially, in this case, you have two democracies, each of them having supermajority, and they talk to each other directly. So instead of blockchains essentially not talking to each other, but just talking to a trusted human or trusted computer, blockchains actually talk to each other, and they relay exactly to each other the collective opinion or the collective decision to transfer tokens. So there's no trusted party, and so the security again becomes, in this case, to break the security, you need to break the security of the majority of nodes on those chains. So the security of the transfer is the same as the security of the concept of the blockchain itself. While if you have a trusted party, then the security of the transfer is way less than the security of the blockchains, because the transfer itself is relying on a single centralized party.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Rob, make sure you get that snippet later and, capture that. All right, Chadwick, can you talk a little bit about just performance? And, I think decentralization is critical, but I don't know if you have any metrics offhand you could share about the SKALE Bridge.
Yeah, I mean, we took a deep look at our own metrics, or at least the IMA bridge networks as it operates on the SKALE network, and compare this to other bridges that are out there. And we did a comparison of costs, at least costs to bring liquidity into the bridge through a deposit mechanism, and then the cost to bring liquidity out back to mainnet. And then we did an analysis that's more interesting around the timing, because time is money. So what is the timing that it requires for different bridges to bring that deposit into the network and then deposit out? And just like Stan said, in certain areas where there's a trusted party, oftentimes that time is significantly, exponentially longer than if it's like a supermajority basis agreement. So on average, SKALE bridge is comparable in cost to some bridges. There's some nuance there because SKALE uses BLS threshold signatures, and that signature adds to the data, or the amount of data that's passed between the bridge. So in terms of gas, that's a little bit increase in uptick in the amount of gas requirement that's required to exchange messages. But the benefit is when you actually look at the timing. I mean, timing is counterparty risk. And on average, to bring liquidity into like a layer 2 or one of these other bridges, it takes anywhere from 10 minutes to hours. to bring liquidity in. And then to bring liquidity out back to mainnet, it's on the order of hours to weeks. Where Scale, to bring liquidity in and out, it becomes finalized in roughly 18 seconds. So you have an 18-second time to bring liquidity in and out for the supermajority to agree that that transaction exists and to mine that block onto the chain, versus hours or days or weeks where this challenge period could exist that anyone can then challenge this trusted party about whether that transaction existed.
Yeah,
So
and essentially other chains or other bridges are having to bake in kind of all human-oriented dependencies, whether it be people manually approving the transactions, which certainly isn't decentralized. It probably qualifies as a money transmitter, all the way to just putting the onus on the end user to call foul over a time period. So one thing we're doing, these metrics are so strong. What we decided is, rather than us just publishing them and people being, oh, that's a Scale team publishing things that are really make Scale look good, we're working with an analyst firm, supplying them our data, letting them do their own research and publish a third-party opinion, because these metrics are great, as well as a decentralization component. So one of the top tier crypto analyst firms will be pushing that out, and we're excited about that. Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, Chadwick, next question. If a chain is live, so we have these chains that have gone live on V2. Does that mean there's dApps on the chain? Does that mean we can have a block explorer and see stuff happening, or are those separate events?
Yeah, so good question. They're separate events. The chain creation process is pretty quick and pretty autonomous. Again, that's all orchestrated as transactions on Ethereum mainnet by Scale Manager. But once the chain is created, again, there's several steps of basically running initial tests to make sure that the chain looks good, the performance is within spec, and then actually transferring custody of that chain, again, the ownership or all the administration features, over to the client or customer. And then the customer then needs to go through the process of instantiating permissions, multi-sticking out different permissions, either on the mainnet side of the chain, which would be the IMA mainnet, or all the range of configuration options that exist on the Scale chain. So there's a lot of administration or like configurability that needs to be done up front. And then once the dApp comes in, they can then deploy contracts onto the Scale chain. And right then, there's a lot of testing and proving that the dApp developer will need to do, and then connecting IMA and everything else. So there's quite a bit of process. The Scale chain creation process is pretty quick, but then it's requiring the client time to get in there, configure it up, set it up, do their own testing, do their own deployments and whatnot, connecting the bridge, file storage, configuring all the chain variables, and connecting the IMA mainnet bridge. And that takes several days depending on the client itself.
Yeah, so essentially all the work they had to do to deploy and test in the testnet, they have to do again in the mainnet. And then they want to run tests just to make sure it works before, people go put real money and real effort into playing games, using Web3 applications, or participating in liquidity pools, et cetera. Which I think is a good segue. Next question, please explain phase 2 and why dApps aren't live yet. I thought Scale V2 is live already. Okay, so it is, to Chadwick's point, it is live. Scale V2 is live. Chains have been created. Chains will continue to keep being created and paid for and as they're created, then a whole series of steps comes into place. Another thing to note is, in order for Scale, the Ruby and Boot and the other partners that are all going live on the Scale Europa chain, there is a proposal to have one single kind of lane from Ethereum to Scale. And if we do that, it makes the mapping uniform across all the Scale chains. And you see this in other networks, like there's a lot of bridges going into Solana right now. Then there's all these different versions of USDC or ETH, depending on what bridge it came from. And so with Scale, if there's one, now, hey, anybody could create a lot of bridges. It's decentralized. We can't stop anybody. it's their own, a developer can do whatever they want to do. But if they want to, and they want to make the user experience good across, all these chains, they can leverage the Ruby hop or the Europa hop to go from mainnet, Europa to adapt, which only takes, 18 seconds from mainnet, and there's a fee, but then it takes 10 seconds to 15 seconds to go from Europa to another chain and zero cost. And there's widgets and wallets that are being built to optimize the user experience. So anyways, a lot of the, the follow-on announcements and partnerships and go lives are all kind of like waiting for this, they cascade down from the Europa chain go live. And there's these other projects want to announce them at the right time to capture momentum leading up to their launch. And they also need to know exactly when they can go live with their chain. So these are things, this is a decentralized network. There are a lot of things that are out of our control. We contribute code to the repo, as do a lot of other people. We help with testing, and we also have a team that's out there promoting and getting people to come on board. And we're working with other groups to really endorse the network and its advantages. So at the end of the day, there's the benefits of being decentralized far outweigh the cons. And one of the cons is frankly, just like there's a lot of moving parts in a lot of businesses, a lot of people, a lot of projects, and it's just part of the process.
Can I add one note, Jack,
Yep.
just to piggyback on that? The other point about a decentralized bridge is that as a Scale chain owner, one of these chains that that's been deployed for V2, the Scale chain owner can go in and customize their bridge any way that they see fit. And whether that's adding extra support for any arbitrary contract logic to support any other token standard or any other messaging system, or configuring the flow of how exits work, is all can be done and modified and customized by the Scale chain owner. There's no other bridge that exists like that today.
So for example, like a Connext or a hop could be integrated and configured with a Connext router, and you could get assets instantly from other, big DeFi chains and the Ethereum mainnet over to scale quickly to the Europa chain. And that would be something that we frankly couldn't even get in and do it, nor would we want to, because it's about decentralization. By the way, that is also kind of helps frame Scale. Scale is a network of chains. It's a big vision. Scale's not trying to just be a Scale chain that has the most transactions. We want to have many chains, and we want to have decentralized community projects and enterprises that are launching, think of like a big IP brand or a big clothing brand that has their name chain, right? Powered by Scale. And so what happens is whereas they get their own set of validators, they're buying, by renting from the network, security from all the validators. They're buying shared security is really what they're buying. And they don't have to go set up their own validators. You can instantly have a big, powerful chain that with validators plugged in that work for you in this aligned security model that's also built and integrated with the Ethereum mainnet that funnels revenue back to Ethereum, but also leverages the power and security of Ethereum to support at the chain level. Okay. All right. Thank you. So Stan, this one's for you. This is from JustCal24. Can you explain how Scale deals with spam transactions when there is no gas?
Yeah, okay, that was a hard question. I think my phone just fell. Yeah, that's a great question. So if you look at how things are changing in the world of blockchain, I think pretty much everyone now, at least today, kind of converges to the same idea that the future is going to be the universe of blockchains. Some people call it metaverse of blockchains. We call it scaleverse of blockchains. So that's pretty much, I think, it's a done deal. It's clear that in the future we'll have this connected blockchains. And then the question becomes, why is it important first to have zero fee? Why is it so extremely important? And I think the reason is that what we see is that we see stagnation. Essentially, for the last 3 or 4 years, the number of users of blockchains doesn't really grow. The number of people that play blockchain games is tiny, it's minuscule. It's nothing comparing to how many people play mobile games. Even like the crappiest mobile game has millions of users. So basically, there's something fundamentally wrong that prevents blockchain use, Web3 use, and this thing is transaction fees. Because when you use YouTube or you use Google or you use Facebook, you don't pay transaction fees. So that's why it's so important that Scale actually has zero transaction fees. But then the question becomes, how do you fight spam and how do you find denial of service attacks, right? If you don't have transaction fees, and that's actually possible if you think about centralized applications like Facebook or Google or YouTube. The way it goes is that, when you go to Facebook, Facebook will probably show you 100 photo images a day, 1,000 images a day. But if you try on Facebook to watch 1,000 plus one image, it will slow you down. So free does not mean that it's an unlimited resource. So in the Web 2 world, you're still limited. Also, you're typically free to use Google and Facebook and everything, but you have your quota. Very much like this on Scale, transactions are free, but the developer of the app actually decides how much quota of transactions each user has. And the way it's done is done by using something which we call zero fuel. So the guys who actually built the app, they can print as much of this zero fuel as they want, but they give it then to users, and for users it's a limited quantity. It's a free but limited quantity, and then so the users can only do certain number of actions per day, per hour. Very much the same like on Facebook, on Google. Google won't let you do more than 1,000 searches. If you do more than 1,000 searches a day, they'll think you're a bot and they will start slowing you down or kind of throttling what you do. So that's pretty much the same idea. So it's totally possible to have free actions and still protect against denial of service. And the proof for this is very simple, is the Web 2 world. Pretty much everything which happens in the Web 2 is free. Google, YouTube, Facebook, you name it. And so it works. So that's very much the policy, the vision at Scale, that we want Web3 applications to be as easy to use as Web 2 applications. This means zero fees. Because if we're not, until we are able to do the same user experience for Web3 as people have in the Web 2, they just won't use Web3, and that's what we are seeing. So out of all the projects, I think, in the Ethereum kind of ecosystem, Scale is the only project that has zero transaction fees, but is also able to effectively fight spam and denial of service and all kinds of things.
Awesome. Thank you. By the way, you'll see the zero fuel is called, I think the short term will be S fuel in the application, but it's a Scale zero cost fuel, zero fuel, or Scale fuel or S fuel. Okay, Chadwick, a question from Ben. Does Scale run on AWS? And if so, how is Scale decentralized?
Okay. Scale network does not run on AWS. Let me caveat that. The SKALE Core Team further, SKALE Core Team does not run any nodes on mainnet. All the nodes on a Scale network mainnet are all run by our validators. Validators can use any type of network. We have a lot of validators that use bare metals, a lot of other validators that use multiple cloud service providers, and a whole assortment of infrastructure. And again, that's their choice and their optimization around their infrastructure and whatnot. Scale Network as a core team in terms of testing and getting some staging chains out to customers does use a variety of networks, including AWS and other cloud providers and some bare metals to help support the testing effort. Again, this gives us access and insight into the issues that validators might incur using different bare metals and different infrastructure providers. So we use a variety of this to help augment our testing efforts. So TLDR is,
I think, yeah. So just in summary, what it comes down to is Scale is just software that needs to run on a computer. Those computers we call nodes. These computers are actually high-powered computers, servers, and people either run bare metal, which means they go to like a data warehouse, they buy equipment on their own, or they can use any cloud service provider to run that computer. And some people may run them on AWS, other people may run them on Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure or Hetzner. There's just a big diversity, and Scale is, just the same as every other proof of stake network. Now, thankfully, no one can use AWS exclusively with Scale because you also have to have an SGX node, which isn't supported by AWS.
Yeah, Jack, I want to add a little bit. I totally agree with what you and Chadwick said. I just wanted to add a little bit more interesting information. So I think, definitely running what's happening in the blockchain world, it's not perfect, right? Like everyone running things on AWS, validators running things on AWS. Does it really mean that things are decentralized? Well, we know that AWS crashes like regularly, and that's problem number one. Problem number two is that just running so many, not only Scale, but so many other networks on AWS definitely makes AWS a party that can influence decentralization. But there's another problem. Even the worst one is that you look at all different networks, and the only network in existence now that does not store keys on AWS is Scale. So we store keys in hardware. What does it mean? It means that tomorrow Jeff Bezos, the founder of AWS, can wake up, and this person, Jeff Bezos, I can claim, can hack and compromise all proof of stake networks in the world, with the exception of Scale, including ETH2. Because to my knowledge, most of the ETH2 nodes run on AWS. They store keys on their AWS hard drives. Jeff Bezos can wake up tomorrow, just read those keys from the hard drives, and so we are the only ones that actually protect against this, because our keys are not stored on AWS, and they are not available to AWS employees or whatever. I think in the future this provides us a really strong security advantage, because at one point someone will get hacked, or AWS will get hacked. These keys will get compromised, and this means that you may actually wake up and you will see that some really big networks may just go down completely. So unfortunately, security is such a thing. It's not proactive; it's like retroactive. In the sense, people only care about security when bad things happen. Then they start caring about this. But I think in the future, what I hope will happen, if Scale would be like a network number one by market cap, then we could go to all of the validators and tell them not to run on AWS or decentralized. But unfortunately or fortunately, we have to also be realistic. So we understand that that's why we actually let validators to run on AWS for now. But I think the real future, if people want to get really serious about decentralization, definitely running things on AWS is not a good idea. Also, it's super expensive. AWS is like 10 times more expensive than running things on your own server. So I think, I hope that in the future, Scale will not run on AWS, and more of our validators will actually choose hardware servers which is just like much less expensive, by the way. But currently having the entire situation, so many networks, so many things, validators use AWS to automate things, so it becomes cheaper for them. Just even though running virtual machines is more expensive, but because of automation, the entire thing becomes less expensive. So now AWS plays very significant role. I hope that it will not play forever. I hope that in the future there will be more and more people running hardware, and so the networks, the proof of stake networks, become really decentralized.
Yeah, great points. Okay, another one from Ben. What would happen to Scale if Ethereum went down? Now, I answered this on Saturday on Twitter, but said I wanted Stan to go deeper. Now, I'll tell you the pieces. So Scale's built on Ethereum. So if you wanted to stake, if you wanted to claim staking rewards, if you wanted to set up a new node, if you wanted, to rotate a chain, if a chain had to self-heal, there's all these functions that just frankly can't happen without the Ethereum network. If you want to, claim staking rewards, all these things would be stuck, right? Until Ethereum's back up and running. Now, the acute liveliness of the Scale node, once it's deployed and you have consensus running, Stan, I know we haven't been able to test that against the Ethereum mainnet going down, but would that chain sustain liveliness in terms of it just being able to continue to have consensus function during that period, like an 8-hour period or 3-hour period or something?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jack. So I think what we want to have in the future, we want to be more and more independent of Ethereum. And in particular, there are, if you look at tokens, there are tokens that are minted on Ethereum and moved to Scale, and tokens that are minted on Scale, and then these tokens just actually pretty much go from one place to another on Scale network. So definitely, we want tokens to be minted on Scale. There's no point for tokens to be minted on Ethereum. It's very expensive. Transferring tokens from Ethereum to Scale is expensive. So we actually want to be as a metaverse and a Scaleverse. We have lots of blockchains, and we don't really want to depend on Ethereum. But in reality, there are many tokens which have really huge market cap, like for instance USDC, that exist on Ethereum. And for those tokens, definitely, if even if they are moved to Ethereum to Scale, if Ethereum network goes down, it's gonna be a big thing. And one thing to understand is, so if Ethereum network goes down, Scale chains will continue running. You won't be able to create new chains because new chains are coordinated by Ethereum. You won't be able to create new chains, but the existing chains will go just fine. Token transfers inside Ethereum, inside Scaleverse, will go just fine. So for tokens that are minted and exist and live on Scale network, nothing is going to happen. People just won't notice anything. Tokens that come from Ethereum network to Scale definitely will get affected. Now, I think this question is not a theoretical question, because we all are waiting for something which is called Ethereum merge. It's a huge jump which is going to take place sometime at the end of this year. Ethereum 1 is going to turn into Ethereum 2. All of the data from Ethereum 1 somehow will get exported into Ethereum 2. So there will be a huge transition from Ethereum 1 to Ethereum 2. And it's actually, one can predict quite a turbulence, because Ethereum 1 network was running for many years. It's kind of polished, miners have good networks. They ironed out all of the bugs. It's kind of tried and true. And now you take this entire thing and moving it to a new thing, right? And so the Scale token lives on Ethereum, but not only Scale token, USDC lives on Ethereum. So many things live on Ethereum network. So what we hope, I think what may happen when the merge happens, in the worst thing, we can wake up and say things get stuck. No one can actually prevent ETH2 from having a bug and having stuck for a while. But having the importance of Ethereum network I hope that whatever bug is found, it will get resolved. So in the worst case, some things won't be available, say for Scale token or for USDC or for someone else on Ethereum. So to make long story short, I think there will be a really interesting time when there will be this merge, and one can almost for sure predict some type of a turbulence when this happens, including even possibly things not being available for some time, but having the huge importance of Ethereum in today's world. One can almost be sure, so whatever things crash, they will be kind of restored, and then the bugs will be fixed, and it will run again. But if people just use Scale, if people mint on Scale and just use Scale, they won't get affected at all. The existing chains will just keep on running.
Yep. Okay, excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Stan. Okay, question from Dirk. Can you please further explain the modular setup of Scale in a way comparable like Celestia? It would be good to understand the level of modularity for the larger public. So what I'd say is Celestia is a chain that's raised huge amounts of capital, as have other modular layer one chains. And for us, we see that and we're just like, big smiles come to our faces because it's just further proof of the product market fit. So when I say, hey, Scale's a year behind the old tech because we're launching something so complex and sophisticated, but we're a year ahead of the new tech that's getting funded. That's another great example of a modular chain that, they're saying they're the first modular chain, but Scale is a modular blockchain that's already live. And now they have the same model where instead of using Ethereum as a base layer, they have their own consensus base layer, and then you can light up these chains. And my understanding is they're using roll-up mechanisms to do bridging between their sub chains and their kind of main consensus layer, and kind of splitting up the end-all be-all consensus to the contract execution. And they're trying to do it in a way that's less gas intensive, using a roll-up in the Ethereum world and bringing that back down into, the Ethereum network. Now, the funny thing about this is there's just also this like roll-ups are almost a religion. And so it's almost like somebody just like forked Christianity, and everyone's like, what did you do? And like, so there's all this infighting in the roll-up community because they're not bringing the roll-up back down to the Ethereum network in the most, blessed manner. So it's, we look at that and just think, hey, it's amazing to see more innovation get funded. It's, we have a mechanism that enables, through threshold encryption, bridging to take place and settlement to happen by that still relies on scale consensus, but it leverages a decentralized messaging layer when we bridge. And so Scale, we feel we could add a rollup, but we don't need it. It's superfluous when you have BLS threshold encryption for the IMA bridge. And so the other difference Scale has between other kind of like modular layer one efforts, and now I would say Scale is kind of this hybrid modular layer one, to layer two, because we're on Ethereum, but you can mint tokens on Scale. Tokens can transfer everywhere, but a huge advantage Scale has over just being live is a big deal. Everyone knows how long this stuff takes to build, how hard it is to build. But the other piece is being able to move from between chains. Now, you could have a world of blockchains, but if it's hard for a user to go from a game to a DEX or a metaverse to an NFT marketplace on different chains, you lose the value of the additional supply, the network supply. So Scale's IMA bridge, it's fast, inexpensive, fast, free between chains, and there's a widget and unified user experience. Further enhances this advantage of having this cohesive world of chains. So what I've seen, I think there was a proposal for Polkadot to have their chains talk. They have 12 chains now, or 11 chains, and those chains are going to be able to talk someday. And so other people are realizing what we realized a long time ago was you need a lot of chains to scale, but you need those chains to be able to have cohesive communication. Stan, I know you want to say something. Go for it.
Yeah, I just want to add, I totally agree with what you said, Jack. I think it's nice that what we see is that many people in the industry start thinking in the same way that we are thinking. And, they call it differently. But the reality is that ultimately there will be one design for everything, and the design will be simple. It's like, if you look at old documentaries, how people built like airplanes when they were just like new. First, the airplane was a very new thing. You had all kind of crazy designs of airplanes, right? One wing, two wings, three wings, crazy things. But and so when things get invented, initially all kinds of crazy things people try. But now an airplane is a very bored thing. Totally didn't change since 60s. The airplanes of today very much look the same as they looked in 1960s. So it's just, ultimately, I think when things start, people overestimate the importance of exotic things. And then as the industry matures, it just becomes much simpler. So I think when blockchain industry will mature, people will realize that basically you just need blockchains and you need many of them and you need a good way for them to interact. And it's fantastic that people call this modular chains or this chains or that chains, but it's not really so important. I think, it's like my cousin's wife bought this new car, and it's a French car, and she says, wow, that's a fantastic car, and it's like a super new design for the engine, which has 3 cylinders. It's not 2 cylinders, no 4 cylinders, it's a 3-cylinder car. So she's really excited about this, but I'm like, is it really important if you have a BMW and you have this car with 3 cylinders from France? I don't want to insult French designers, but still, I think it's what's important about BMW is not even how many cylinders it has, but it's polished and every single component is perfected. And I think what we're gonna see in the future, people will talk less about exotic things and more about the way people will make difference between, say, Scale or some other people that create, universes of blockchains or multi-blockchain networks. They will use the same principle as how people think BMW is better than Peugeot. It just runs better, I think. So I think what for us at Scale, the most important thing is to polish it and to make it run better.
All right, awesome. Hey, I saw another question come in that I'm going to add to this list. And I believe it was from Icy. What is the timeline for governance implementation? So Scale is a DAO, and there will not be any changes to any core economic functions without a DAO vote, okay? And so our goal is this summer to have a vote and start implementing these votes. Now, when we think about core economic functions, these are different than like, oh, hey, let's get this thing patched and Ethereum just changed something on the mainnet. We need to push this thing out to make sure that, whatever works. Like those things shouldn't require governance, that are just kind of like light housekeeping. But let's say we want to change the MSR. Like, okay, we already at a point this summer where we're going to need more chains. And so we're going to have to lower MSR as one mechanism to do that. We also know that pricing comes into play, and the price model as the network gets overloaded, the price of chains goes up. Now the current price model will be published. It's been put through, I'd say 20 different companies as far as creating this super elaborate Excel model that and Chadwick and some other people will be publishing a report on this. Now, what will happen is this thing that's gone through all of these kind of like open sourced contribution from app developers and validators is going to be published as the pricing. But a day later, somebody could submit a proposal to change that in some capacity. But what we also want to do is create a model that's really accessible for as many people as possible, so we can get as many smart minds as possible saying, hey, have you thought about adding this or changing this? And open source, not just the code, but the economics, because economics are a major component of the Scale network differentiator, okay? But what I can assure you is that you're not going to see any centralized group of actors go change the MSR or change any sort of key mechanics on price and or even like, for example, staking rewards, right? There's a fixed supply of inflation. The community may say, hey, we want to increase inflation so that we can subsidize better DApp growth, just like you see these other chains doing, where they're like, hey, let's keep transaction fees down. For us, it's chain fees. So those types of proposals can come through, and they're all connected into the economic system. But that's not our role. We're just, we're like the humble servants helping produce code and helping, evangelize. The community will be involved in any sort of major decisions. And trust me, people listening, if I know we have some validators, that's a really hot topic. Validators and DApp developers are the most acutely impacted by these economic decisions. It's a community run project. So all of them will be involved in that voting. So we're excited to see also voting. One of the things we're working on too is how can we get this voting to take place on Scale, right? So the Scale token obviously lives on the Ethereum mainnet, and we've got good friends in the voting business like Tally, but we would love for people to be able to use their mainnet wallets without having to bridge all the Scale over to Scale to be able to vote with those and do it on a Scale application. And so we're using our own, and why should somebody pay a bunch of gas fees to vote on the mainnet when they could vote on Scale? And we have all these DAOs launching on Scale because of that. So we need to eat our own dog food and get those things living on Scale. Now, it's not built yet because, hey, it's more important to prioritize resources to get V2 live. Okay. All right. Next question. And by the way, we're just going to keep rolling. I think we've got Chadwick, Stan, and I have at least another 30 or 28 more minutes. So we're going to go a little further, or if there's no questions, we'll stop. But we're just going to keep rolling here. All right, Chadwick, please elaborate on the status of the Block Explorer, when and how. And I know I had updated some people that there's a kind of, I guess it has to point towards V2, and there's a Block Scout, and eventually Block Explorers 2 are anybody at any time could build one. This is all open information constantly. But can you talk a little bit about the efforts taking place now to point those explorers, so this day that the Europa chain goes live, the day Block Brawlers goes live, that people can see aggregated information across chains?
Yeah, definitely. So every chain that's deployed automatically has a native Block Explorer tied into it. And this is, we use Block Scout. We had forked Block Scout, modified it to basically pull an index for each Scale chain. So again, every single Scale chain that's produced on mainnet and test networks all have this Block Scout Explorer tied into it. Right now, that's just being offered to the Scale chain owner and the developer community just to help augment their development efforts, getting them to go live faster with the tools that they need to diagnose and test and whatnot. And we do have a main page. And again, we'll be doing some modifications just to improve the infrastructure of that page, just to support the amount of hits or the amount of flow into that page. And so we'll make those updates soon, probably in the next week or two. And then that way other people can then see and address and pull and explore data on each of those individual chains.
Yeah. And the reality is the party's just getting started. All these partners have been waiting for V2 because they don't want to be on an island. They want to be able to talk to each other and have their users move. So the fun data, the on-chain metrics, that's why the DApp radar integration is going live on V2, not on V1. That's why there'll also be efforts to get Dune Analytics and Nansen and these, data aggregators all plugged in to Scale to see what's happening on V2.
Yeah, just to add, Jack, just want to add a little bit more about how our Explorer works. So a great thing about Ethereum ecosystem and being compatible with Ethereum is that you essentially get a Block Explorer for free. So Block Scout is a great explorer, totally open source, from a friend of mine who now works, I think, at Gnosis. So Block Scout is just fantastic. It's open source, and because Scale is Ethereum compatible. We just did little tweaks for Block Scout, literally like changed a couple of lines of code, not so much. And so far it runs pretty well. People are maintaining Block Scout. You can see all kinds of things. You can see transactions, and you can see contracts. So everything. It's a very good explorer. It's as powerful as Etherscan, but totally free and open source. So the Explorer is doing pretty well. One thing to understand about Explorer is Explorer, just to show you blocks and transactions, is constant. It's like Google essentially, constantly indexing and loading the chain. So if you look at the chain and the Explorer is the search engine. You can view it as a search engine for a chain, right? So it indexes the chain the same way like Google indexes all the time websites, the internet. The Explorer indexes the chain and puts lots of loads. So one of the things that we are releasing soon to lessen the load of the Explorer on the chain is something which is called replica node or full sync node. It's a read-only replica on Scale node. It's an additional node anyone can run. You can, if you like a particular chain, you can run this replica node for this chain. And then the Explorer will actually connect to the replica node. And the importance of the replica node, first of all, provides additional backup and archive. But second, you stop loading the chain, pushing too much computational requirements on the chain, because now you connect to the replica node. So I think once we introduce the replica node, which is going to happen like within the next couple of weeks, people will be able to run block explorers and connect to replica nodes, which will make the explorers faster, and also will take the load of the chain, which is fantastic. I can tell you another story. I was recently, with my free minute, I was trying to find an explorer for Solana, and I couldn't find any. I was just trying to find something which is similar to Ethereum, where you can go and do transactions. There's like just a web page where it shows like 2,000 transactions per second. And then I read some stuff on Twitter, people saying, actually out of those 2,000 transactions, only 10% are really user transactions, and 90% are just some special things that Solana itself generates. So it actually runs only on 200 transactions per second, and there's no explorer for it. So it shows that how great the Ethereum ecosystem is, because on Ethereum you have the standard thing, which is an explorer. And so you have a transaction, and you can actually go and see this transaction in the explorer, and which provides lots of security. And also it provides open source is great, because a project like ours, we don't need to build an explorer. We just basically got the source code of Block Scout and used it, and we just thank the Block Scout community so much for building such a great explorer. But there are some plans. Last thing which I want to mention, there are some plans for further tweaks for the Explorer, because we need to show things like how tokens flow move from one chain to another. So there has to be some additional UI for it. So we're thinking about tweaking the Block Scout a little more, so we can actually show how token transfers happen. So there will be some interesting things happening in the Explorer space in the future.
Yep. Yeah, and we also we've had a number of conversations with the Etherscan team. So we need to, a big issue there was just there's a ton of Scale chains. How do they plug into them? Scale's advanced in terms of the readability for indexers. So we'll be picking up that, and hey, I think we'll have pretty much everything we need with Block Scout, but hey, it's a blockchain, so I expect this data to be read from many, many different sources and consumed in different ways. So, all right, okay. All right, next question. All right, so Chadwick, I think we've addressed this pretty effectively, but when are we going to start seeing this activity and metrics? I think pretty clear. It's when the
dApps go live.
Hit that one over the head again. Kick the dead horse.
dApps go live, Block Explorer, we get the full sync node, and then we can pipe in stuff like Dune Analytics and other data. So we're really excited about getting that going and getting more indexing, getting more data, more graphical representation of what's happening on these multiple skill chains.
Maybe a better question is how much effort is going in to helping that happen as soon as possible by all of, maybe like 30 different teams? How would you answer that? Is there a sense of urgency?
There's a lot. I mean, obviously, once you get a skill chain live, what's happening on that chain? And obviously, we want to show, the core team wants to show what skill chains can really do. And having data into that will give insights as to really what is the maximum performance these chains can really operate on. So again, we're just heads down on getting V2 chains out to customers, getting those hubs up and launched. Next effort is, all right, let's get the indexers, block explorers, doing analytics, all those things piped in. So now you can read all the great data that's being piped and transacted on scale chains.
Yeah, the sun definitely never sets on Scale. There, 24 hours a day. There are people working on every corner of this project. We understand, there's a huge sense of urgency, and everybody's doing everything they can to get these, things live as soon as possible. So I'm pumped. And again, just to reiterate, we will be waiting for an update. The Ruby and Boot and the teams that are involved with the Europa chain have work to do, but it's not work from scratch. It's really deployment and configuration and testing work. And they will produce their own dates. They probably get tired of me calling them saying, what's the date? What's the date? But, they're working as fast as they can, but we're at a point where, we've been at this a long time, and, it's just, there'll be a quality execution at the end, not rushed execution, even though that'll be done with a great sense of urgency. Okay. All right. I had a question. As an artist, can I give the IMA bridge a directive? I think essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, but I think what Saka had a really great question here. Can you give the IMA bridge a directive so that an asset doesn't leave a scale chain? Is it possible to restrict the flow of something as an NFT artist?
Yes, you can. As the IMA bridge, again, the skill chain owner has control over configuring the bridge. And that skill chain owner could be a single person. It could be a 12 out of 14 multi-sig. It could be a DAO. So there's no guidance around what that is. It's really up to the DApp developer or the skill chain community to define who is governing, who's modifying, configuring the bridge. But yes, as a skill chain owner, whether it's a single owner, DAO, or multi-sig, you can configure the bridge to map specific assets or be able to map and transfer any arbitrary asset. Mm-hmm. So it's really up to you as a skill chain owner to decide what is supported and what is not. Further, like how things flow to the bridge and how things flow out of the bridge can also be configured.
By the way, I've seen a lot of the art Saka has been producing on Twitter. It's awesome. And Saka, you'll be able to go to actually to NF Trade and even just create and deploy right there through the NFT hub. So you don't even have to worry about any sort of chain management. You can see what they have today on NF Trade for other chains they support. Scale will be supported very soon. There's an awesome open source effort. The Lilius team has like some phenomenal developers are I would say spearheading that decentralized initiative along with a lot of other people to get the NFT hub going. But talented artists like yourself will be able to go there and create NFT collections without any developer requirements of coding, just like you can do on OpenSea. And hey, eventually that NFT hub, we're going to pull in the other major NFT exchanges. We're in talks with all of them. If you could, think of a big NFT exchange, we're talking to them. But first step is getting these pieces live and getting NFTs live, and then that ecosystem will continue to grow. Stan, go ahead. You have thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to. It's a very interesting subject, NFTs, because I think last year there was this story that the NFTs were the most hype, I think, in the history of the universe. The apes were sold for this incredible amounts of money. And then what we now have is pretty much like kind of the other side of the hype curve. They're crashing, the people losing money, which is kind of natural. I think it always happens. But I think what will end up happening to NFTs is they will ultimately come to the same model which exists already on YouTube with YouTube videos. You know, if you post a YouTube video, initially it may just get like some small number of likes, and then you get more likes, and then suddenly you realize you created something interesting, so lots of people watch it and they share it. So on YouTube, when you upload a video, essentially initially it has no value, and then there's kind of a natural competition and evolution, and the value is acquired, right? Like value being likes. The only problem is that when the value is acquired on YouTube, Google charges, like, takes 90% of the money to itself and pays people 10% back. But I think what's going to happen to NFTs, it will evolve into this reality where there will be lots and lots of NFTs. And most of these NFTs initially will have zero value, very much like when you upload a video to YouTube, initially it has zero value, but then some of them will like gradually acquire the value. And so to do this, it is super important that the platform is free, because you need to have this evolution where you start with like lots and lots of worthless NFTs, and then people judge them, and then somehow some of them acquire value. So that's why I'm super excited about this NFT exchange and all of the NFT projects on Scale, because with Scale, because the transaction fees are zero, NFTs can actually get very different feel where everyone will be able to create them, and then some of them will become really cool, and people will kind of measure creativity of them. While if you take a look at NFTs now, it's mostly hype. It's not really clear why, for instance, apes, like whatever, why they worth so much, compared to other creative works of art other artists are developing. So I really hope that with this kind of an NFT crash which is happening now, we will be able at Scale to kind of get to the NFT space too, a different model for them, where there will be much more, and then they will evolve and kind of more acquire value in a more just way.
Yeah, and I'll also just totally agree, and I want to add to that. We do have some really interesting artists and awesome brands creating NFTs, but in the traditional sense. But we also have, I think, we're at the forefront of what I call functional NFTs. Functional NFTs are NFTs that actually provide a value, an access, something that has functionality instead of just being art. And a big use case clearly is just NFTs that have utility within the metaverse, within gaming. So there's going to be a lot of that's going live on Scale. We're also going to have real IRL NFT functions where you have gated access to events and conferences and festivals, and you have clubs and DAOs using NFTs to gate access and functionality. And so if you think about it, if you want to release a lot of NFTs, let's say you're a major league sports team, and you wanted to release, NFT, 100,000 NFTs to your fans that all gave special access. Well, imagine the cost of doing that. If you have gas fees, even if the gas fees are just dollars, it's hugely expensive to pay $5, $10 even of gas fees for those NFTs. And you can mint them on Scale for free. And imagine every time that those NFTs do something that perform a smart contract call, and you have to pay $10 or $3 or $2 or even $200 on the Ethereum mainnet. It just makes these broad expandable use cases less viable. And so we have some really interesting things that we'll be deploying over time with what I would call functional NFTs. And every big brand is trying to get in the game, and we're out there, I think doing a great job and building good partnerships to help make all that come together. Those sorts of announcements and deals are all, part of the component that we don't control. But you saw today the the NFT products that Fireside is launching are just transformational in terms of, one, getting major Hollywood content funded, and two, giving inside access to fans through gating via NFTs, all while not even having a user know that the user doesn't even need to know they are using an NFT. So we're really, even though we're like at this weird marketplace, we're at the very beginning of just the growth of this industry. And it's just, we're more pumped than ever. Clearly, there's a lot of bad stuff going on in terms of general macro, but from a builder perspective, it's just more exciting than ever, and we're pumped. Okay, now there's a question that we accidentally skipped from Tom. What incentivizes hub chains to compete for dApp chains to join their hub? What will drive the creation of multiple hub chains in the same space, i.e. multiple NFT hubs? And this was also a question asked before on Twitter of saying, well, hey, is this centralized? Who determines who gets to run a hub? Well, it's a really great question from Tom. So I'll kick this off, and then Stan and Chadwick, please follow through. So you can think of, it's really a taxonomy, just a naming convention that aims to coordinate around the network, right? And hubs provide value because, one, they provide services to applications, games, social media products, music streaming. All these different apps need liquidity. They need marketplaces, and they'll need other hub things. And instead of having those things live on every chain, it makes sense for them to be consolidated in one place. Now, initially, why don't we have Boot and Ruby? Actually, there was a decentralized vote where Boot decided to join the Europa chain. All kind of, we're witnessing this from the exterior. Now, Boot could have said, hey, let's start a competitive hub, right? But then there's liquidity fragmentation. So they said, hey, we're both on the Scale ecosystem, building here. Let's combine efforts and make this hub strong. And then let's create a multi-sig and have a governance plan so that nobody has any centralized control. Now, let's say later, a bunch of other big DeFi players come in and they say, hey, let us deploy to that chain. And all the people voting on that chain say, no, we don't want you on this chain, Uniswap or whomever else is coming over, Aave. They might say, well, let's set up our own liquidity hub and compete with you. And if that happens, I think, if it happened on day one, it might be not great because there's just fragmentation. If it happens later, I don't see a situation where we're successful where that won't happen. But there's no zero-sum game. Having multiple hubs is great because the free market forces will eventually determine if a hub can survive, okay? And a hub can't survive unless it has enough liquidity and utility and applications joining it. Now, we as core team members are really just facilitators and shepherds, and want to, and as community members, all of us, when we're voting, I feel like trying to create a fair playing field for people to come and create products and create great customer experiences. That's the goal of Web3, right? No vendor lock-in, no centralized control. You compete based on your value that you give to users and workers. So that's my 2 cents, and would love to hear Stan and Chadwick's thoughts on that question. Okay.
Yeah, I think, it's an interesting question. I think if you look at decentralized applications, there are games, and potentially you can have many games. You can have many NFTs, or ways to create NFTs. So there could be lots and lots of applications. But the particular thing, the marketplaces, it's always been pretty much in the history of computer science or of internet, that marketplaces tend to be super monopolistic, in a sense that, if one marketplace is created, it's extremely hard for another one to exist. You look at eBay, or you look at Amazon store, they have this huge tendency to be monopolistic, and the largest marketplace tends to become larger and the smallest smaller. And if you look at what's happening in DeFi, I just looked just for fun yesterday at like Uniswap and SushiSwap, and it does look like SushiSwap is pretty much like dying. The amount of money on SushiSwap is decreasing. Uniswap is winning. The more money Uniswap has, the more people come to it because there's more liquidity. So there's a very natural cycle where the bigger guy wins. So I think in reality, if you look at what's going to happen on Scale, there will be probably lots of dApps and lots of games and lots of all kinds of things. But as far as marketplaces are concerned, it's almost for sure that there will be only a handful of marketplaces surviving. And that's why it's important for us that the ones that survive are actually decentralized, at least in some way. They have decentralized governance, right? So I think one important thing that we at Scale has nothing to do with all of those things. Scale marketplaces, hubs, we will have no way to manage those things in the same way we don't manage our nodes. We don't want to have anything to do with the marketplaces. But we would like to actually, for these marketplaces, to be actually some type of DAOs or some type of democratic organizations. So although they kind of become monopolists or almost monopolists, they themselves are actually managed in a democratic way, not in a totalitarian way. So that's, I think, what Jack mentioned, that he was talking about how we're going to make, in particular, what's going to happen with our hubs. And I think the best way for hubs is to have some type of a DAO voting or DAO management. And we'll see, it's going to be exciting to see how this actually happens, how it actually plays.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chadwick.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that, I'm really curious to see how these hubs evolve. And I think the stage is set right. Again, you have these scale chains that can be governed or configured by a multi-sig or a DAO or any set of arbitrary contracts. So you have basically the foundation of how different parties or different organizations or projects or DAOs can come together to join and architect a hub and evolve that hub over time. Then every dApp can have free market choice of what is provided by this hub versus this other hub. And there's probably going to be a proliferation and then maybe a consolidation, but all of this is very nicely architected on top of the fundamentals of Scale Network, how you configure the chain, how you can modify it and customize it to your community. So it's going to be really exciting to see how these hubs have evolved and create best practices around organizing and decentralizing around these hubs and these service areas.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Hey, well, thank you for the great questions. We've been just grinding, getting stuff done, but we want to do a lot more of this. Our job is just to help. There's a lot of things that are part of our jobs, but a part of our job in the community is to make sure every piece of information is as open and transparent as possible, including the tech. And the tech is the most transparent piece because it's literally all there in GitHub and to everyone's viewing pleasure constantly. So tomorrow on the Twitter Spaces, we're going to be focusing on more marketing comms topics. One such thing will be the website, and teaser alert, if you saw some new designs behind our faces today, there's some good stuff coming, lots of cool assets. So there's been a lot of hard work from a lot of people. So we're excited tomorrow to share those. And Stan and Chadwick, thanks for joining today. And I'll be back tomorrow with Spring and Marcos on the Spaces. All right, everybody. Thank you. Keep pushing.
Hi, everyone.